Natalie Parker sat at a table for one in the dimly lit corner of Bella Notte, an Italian restaurant far too expensive for her budget. The white tablecloth gleamed under soft chandelier light, making her feel even more out of place. She smoothed down her only decent dress, a navy blue number she'd bought 3 years ago for job interviews, and glanced nervously at her watch. 6:30. Her reservation had been for 6, and she'd already gotten sympathetic glances from the hostess and waiter. Another 30 minutes and even their patience would wear thin. "Just a little longer, please," she had murmured when the waiter approached for the 3rd time. "My dinner." Companion might still arrive. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The truth was there was no dinner companion. There was only her 7-year-old daughter Zoe at home with a babysitter, and a desperately needed job interview that had morphed into a dinner invitation from the hiring manager. Andrew Keller had been clear. Dinner at Bella Notte, 6 o'clock sharp. But he was nowhere to be found, and Natalie was beginning to suspect she'd been stood up, or worse, tested in some cruel way. She needed this marketing position at Parker & Reed Publishing desperately. After her ex-husband Derek had walked out 18 months ago, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a broken heart, she'd struggled to find work that paid enough while allowing her to be there for Zoe. Her savings were nearly depleted, and this month's rent was already 2 weeks late. Natalie took a small sip of water, trying to look composed while mentally calculating how many more minutes she could reasonably wait before accepting defeat. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and laughter around her, couples leaning toward each other over candlelit tables, business associates in tailored suits clinking glasses. No one else sat alone. Just as she was reaching for her purse, resigned to leaving, a commotion erupted at the front of the restaurant. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit strode through the entrance, his presence commanding immediate attention. His dark hair was slightly windblown, and his jawline could have been carved from marble. Several diners turned to stare, and the maitre d' practically tripped over himself rushing to greet him. Natalie watched with mild interest, grateful for the distraction from her humiliation. To her shock, after a brief exchange with the maitre d', the man turned and walked directly toward her table, his intense gaze locked on hers. Before she could process what was happening, he slipped into the chair opposite her, leaned across the table, and spoke in a low, rich voice that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I'm terribly sorry I'm late. Please pretend I'm your husband for the next 10 minutes and I'll explain everything." Natalie froze, clutching her water glass. Up close, she recognized him instantly. Jackson Reed, CEO of Parker & Reed Publishing, the same company where she was interviewing, the same company whose name had been plastered across business magazines for months after Reed had orchestrated a brilliant turnaround of the struggling publishing house. What?" she managed to stammer. His eyes, a striking hazel, held an urgency that stopped her from immediately calling for help. "Please," he repeated, more softly this time. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Over his shoulder, Natalie spotted a woman in a sleek red dress entering the restaurant, scanning the tables with predatory focus. Jackson Reed followed her gaze and tensed visibly. Making a split-second decision that she would probably regret, Natalie reached across the table and took his hand. "Darling," she said, loud enough to be heard at nearby tables, "I was beginning to worry." Relief washed over his features. "Traffic was a nightmare," he replied smoothly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that seemed oddly intimate for complete strangers. "Have you ordered yet?" The woman in red had spotted them and was now approaching their table with determination. As she drew closer, Natalie noticed her immaculate makeup, designer clothing, and the calculating gleam in her eyes. "Jackson?" the woman purred, stopping directly beside their table. "What a coincidence finding you here." Jackson's grip on Natalie's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victoria, yes, quite a surprise." Victoria's gaze slid to Natalie, assessing her with a single sweep that made Natalie acutely aware of her department store dress and lack of expensive jewelry. "And who might this be?" Before Jackson could answer, Natalie found herself speaking. "I'm Natalie Reed," she said, the surname falling from her lips before she could think better of it. "Jackson's wife." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched upward. "Wife? How unexpected. Jackson never mentioned being married." "We've been keeping it quiet," Jackson said smoothly. "You know how I value my privacy, Victoria." Victoria's crimson lips tightened. "Indeed. Well, I won't interrupt your Dinner. She lingered on the last word as if suggesting something entirely different. But do remember our meeting tomorrow, Jackson. The board is eager to hear your decision on the merger. After Victoria reluctantly departed, Natalie pulled her hand away. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain before I walk out of here, she whispered fiercely. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, mussing it further. Victoria Blackwell, CEO of Apex Media. They've been trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Parker and Reed for months. She's been persistent, both professionally and personally. I needed an exit strategy tonight. So you used me? A complete stranger? Not exactly. His expression shifted to one of genuine contrition. You're Natalie Parker, interviewing for our marketing director position. Andrew Keller was supposed to meet you, but he had a family emergency. I was coming to apologize in person and reschedule when I spotted Victoria entering behind me. Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. You know who I am? Your resume was impressive. I make it a point to review all executive-level candidates, he signaled to the waiter. The least I can do now is buy you dinner and conduct the interview myself. This is completely inappropriate, Natalie said, but found herself not reaching for her purse. Absolutely, he agreed, but I'm hoping you're hungry enough to overlook that for now. Natalie should have left, should have maintained her professional dignity, but something in his genuine smile, combined with the very real growl of her empty stomach, and the knowledge that this might be her only chance at landing this job, made her stay. I want to be clear, she said as the waiter approached. I don't make a habit of pretending to be married to CEOs I've just met. Jackson's laugh was unexpected and warm. And I don't make a habit of asking beautiful women to pose as my wife. He paused, then added more seriously, though I suspect neither of us expected how this evening would unfold. As they ordered, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that this bizarre encounter was about to change everything, though whether for better or worse remained to be seen. The waiter returned with their appetizers, a plate of calamari that Natalie would never have ordered for herself, and a selection of bruschetta that smelled divine. She watched as Jackson Reed expertly squeezed lemon over the calamari, his movements precise and confident. So, he said, pushing the plate toward the center of the table in a silent invitation to share, tell me about yourself beyond what I read in your resume. What brings a talented marketing professional with your background to Parker and Reed? Natalie carefully selected a piece of bruschetta, buying herself time to consider her answer. The usual polished interview responses seemed inappropriate given their unusual circumstances. Honestly, I need a job that will allow me to support my daughter and still be present in her life. She met his gaze directly. The flexible schedule mentioned in your job posting caught my attention almost as much as the salary. Jackson seemed surprised by her candor. Your daughter, Zoe, right? She's 7. Natalie tensed. You've done your homework. You mentioned her in your cover letter, he explained. Said she was the reason you've been freelancing for the past year instead of returning to agency work. Yes, well, single parenting doesn't exactly mesh with 60-hour work weeks and constant client emergencies. She took a bite of the bruschetta, nearly closing her eyes at the perfect blend of flavors. After Derek, my ex-husband, left, I had to rethink everything. That must have been difficult, Jackson said, his tone genuinely empathetic rather than pitying. It was. Natalie surprised herself with her openness. One day I had a partner and a secure future. The next I was alone with a 5-year-old, a mortgage I couldn't afford, and skills that seemed suddenly insufficient. Their entrees arrived, a mushroom risotto for her and ossobuco for him, momentarily pausing their conversation. When the waiter departed, Jackson leaned forward slightly. And yet your portfolio shows remarkable work during exactly that time period. The Highlands Creek tourism campaign was brilliant, increased visitor traffic by 40% in a notoriously difficult market. Natalie felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. That campaign was born of desperation, actually. I needed to prove myself quickly after starting freelance work. Desperation often breeds innovation, Jackson remarked. Some of my best business decisions came when my back was against the wall. Like pretending a job candidate is your wife to avoid an aggressive competitor. Natalie couldn't resist asking, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Jackson laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. Touché, Ms. Parker, though I'd call that more improvisation than desperation. As they ate, their conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Jackson asked insightful questions about her previous campaigns, seeming genuinely interested in her creative process. In turn, Natalie found herself curious about his journey. "How does someone your age end up CEO of a publishing empire?" she asked. "The business press makes it sound like you appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago." Something flickered across his expression, a shadow that vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "The simplified version? I started in the mailroom at 19, worked my way through college doing various jobs at smaller publishing houses, made some smart investments, and eventually had enough capital to become a major stakeholder when Parker and Reed was struggling." "And the unsimplified version?" Jackson studied her for a moment. "That's considerably longer and not nearly as tidy." He took a sip of his wine. "But it involves a foster care system that failed me repeatedly, a high school librarian who quite literally saved my life by introducing me to books, and a stubborn refusal to accept the future that statistics predicted for someone with my background." Natalie felt as though she'd been granted a glimpse behind a carefully constructed facade. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "You didn't," he assured her. "Curiosity is an asset in marketing. You should know who you might be working for." Their plates were cleared, and Jackson ordered coffee for both of them, along with a tiramisu to share. As the dessert arrived, Victoria Blackwell reappeared, this time accompanied by an older gentleman in an expensive suit. "Jackson," she called, her voice carrying across several tables. "What a surprise you're still here. Allow me to introduce Harold Winters, one of our major investors at Apex." Jackson's expression remained pleasant, but Natalie noticed his posture stiffen. Without thinking, she reached across the table and took his hand, just as she had earlier. "Darling," she said, her voice honeyed but firm, "didn't you promise to be home early tonight? Zoe wanted to show you her science project before bedtime." Jackson's eyes widened almost imperceptibly before he caught on. "You're right, I completely lost track of time." He turned to Victoria and Harold. "My apologies, but family commitments take precedence." Harold looked between them with undisguised curiosity. "I wasn't aware you had a family, Reed. Victoria certainly never mentioned it." "As I told Victoria earlier, we value our privacy," Jackson replied smoothly. Natalie smiled sweetly at Victoria. "It was lovely meeting you earlier. Perhaps next time we can chat longer. I'd love to hear about your marketing strategies at Apex. I've always found them interesting." Victoria's smile turned brittle. "Yes, well, we should let you get back to your evening. Harold, shall we?" After they departed, Jackson exhaled slowly. "That was brilliantly done. Where did you learn to deliver perfectly polite corporate barbs?" "6 years at Thompson & Hayes Advertising taught me the art of the elegant takedown," Natalie replied, realizing she was still holding his hand, and quickly releasing it. "Though I probably shouldn't antagonize the competition before I even have the job. On the contrary, I'm more convinced than ever that you're exactly what we need." Jackson's expression turned serious. "Victoria's interest in our company isn't just business. Parker and Reed own several valuable literary estates and has first rights to some major authors' backlists. If Apex acquires us, those properties would be exploited in ways that violate everything we stand for." "And what do you stand for exactly?" "The radical notion that books should be published because they deserve to be read, not just because they can turn a quick profit." His passion was evident in the intensity of his gaze. "My predecessor lost sight of that. I'm trying to restore it." As they finished their dessert, Natalie checked her watch and gasped, "It's nearly 9. I need to get home to relieve my babysitter." Jackson immediately signaled for the check. "Of course. I've kept you much too long." He hesitated, then added, "But I'd like to continue our discussion. The job is yours if you want it, but I understand if tonight's unorthodox interview gives you reservations." Natalie gathered her purse, mind racing. "I need to think about it. This evening has been unusual?" he supplied with a small smile. "That's one word for it." She stood as he paid the bill, torn between professional opportunity and the warning bells ringing faintly in the back of her mind. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." Outside the restaurant, Jackson insisted on calling her a car service. As they waited on the sidewalk, the spring air cool against her skin, Natalie couldn't help but wonder if she was seeing the real Jackson Reed or merely another carefully crafted persona. "Thank you for playing along tonight," he said quietly. "I owe you one." "Yes," she agreed as her car arrived. "You definitely do." The next morning, Natalie sat at her small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee while Zoe chatted excitedly about the day ahead. Sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, highlighting the worn edges of their furniture and the water stain on the ceiling that the landlord had promised to fix months ago. "And then we're going to dissect owl pellets, Mom. Real ones." Zoe's eyes sparkled as she spooned cereal into her mouth, milk dribbling down her chin. "That sounds fascinating, sweetie," Natalie replied, reaching over to wipe her daughter's face with a napkin. "Just remember to wash your hands very thoroughly afterward." "I know, Mom," Zoe said, with the exaggerated patience only children can muster. "Mrs. Fitzgerald always makes us use hand sanitizer twice." Natalie smiled, tucking a strand of Zoe's wild blonde curls behind her ear. In so many ways her daughter was her opposite, outgoing where Natalie was reserved, fearlessly curious where Natalie was cautious. Zoe had her father's coloring, but thankfully, none of his selfishness. "Finish up, Munchkin, the bus will be here in 10 minutes. As Zoe raced to brush her teeth, Natalie's phone chimed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Good morning, Natalie. It's Jackson Reed. I hope this isn't too forward, but I wanted to check if you've had time to consider our conversation. The position is yours if you want it. Starting salary, $85K. Flexible hours as discussed." Natalie nearly dropped her coffee mug. 85,000. The job posting had listed the range as competitive, but she'd been thinking 60, maybe 65 at most. That kind of money would change everything. She could move them to a better apartment, start rebuilding her decimated savings, maybe even set aside something for Zoe's college fund. Before she could reply, a second text arrived. "Also, I feel I should warn you. Victoria Blackwell was asking questions about you after we left. My assistant will be calling to brief you on some details just in case. I apologize for the complications." A cold knot formed in Natalie's stomach. What had she gotten herself into? Before she could dwell on it further, Zoe bounded back into the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom, can we get ice cream after school? Please? Jake said there's a new place that has bubblegum flavor." "We'll see, honey. Depends on how much work I get done today." Natalie ushered her daughter toward the door, momentarily setting aside thoughts of Jackson Reed and his complicated world. After dropping Zoe at the bus stop, Natalie returned to find a sleek black car idling outside her apartment building. A woman in a crisp pantsuit stood beside it, checking her watch with military precision. "Miss Parker," the woman called as Natalie approached. "I'm Rebecca Winters, Mr. Reed's executive assistant. May we speak privately?" 20 minutes later, Natalie sat stunned in her living room as Rebecca efficiently outlined what she called the situation. "Victoria Blackwell has scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning," Rebecca explained, her posture ramrod straight, even on Natalie's sagging couch. "Our intelligence suggests she plans to announce that Jackson Reed fabricated a marriage to manipulate stock prices and investor confidence." "But that's ridiculous," Natalie protested. "It was just a misunderstanding at dinner." Rebecca's expression remained impassive. "Ms. Blackwell visited 3 other tables after speaking with you, telling them she was a close friend of Mr. Reed's and expressing surprise at learning about his secret wife. By midnight, it had reached a gossip columnist at the Business Journal." Natalie's head spun. But why would anyone care about Jackson Reed's marital status? Because Parker and Reed's largest investor group is Heartland Publishing, a family-owned consortium with traditional values. They've been nervous about having a young single CEO at the helm. Mr. Reed's perceived stability directly impacts their confidence. Rebecca's tone suggested she found the situation as absurd as Natalie did, but was too professional to say so. "So what exactly does Jackson want from me?" Rebecca handed her a folder. "A 3-month contract. You publicly play the role of Mrs. Reed during key events while privately starting your new position as marketing director. After sufficient time has passed, you'll separate amicably due to career differences. Parker and Reed retains investor confidence, completes its restructuring away from Apex's influence, and you receive a substantial bonus in addition to your regular salary." Natalie flipped through the contract, her eyes widening at the compensation figures. "This is insane." "Perhaps," Rebecca acknowledged. "But the alternative is a corporate takeover that would result in massive layoffs and the dissolution of several imprints dedicated to literary fiction and educational publishing. And what about my daughter? How do I explain to a 7-year-old that she needs to pretend someone is her stepfather?" "The contract includes provisions for limited public appearances with Zoe, subject to your approval," Mr. Reed is prepared to meet with both of you privately first to ensure Zoe's comfort. Rebecca checked her watch. He's requested you join him for lunch to discuss details, assuming you're interested. And if I'm not? The marketing position remains yours regardless. Mr. Reed was explicit about that. Rebecca stood, smoothing her already immaculate suit. He asked me to assure you there's no pressure, but time is of the essence if you are interested. After Rebecca left, Natalie paced her apartment, the contract clutched in her hand. This was madness. Absolute madness. And yet, the practical part of her brain, the part that lay awake at night worrying about Bill's and Zoe's future, couldn't ignore the financial security this offered. Her phone rang, her mother calling from Florida. "Hi, Mom. Natalie, I just saw the most extraordinary thing online. There's a picture of you with Jackson Reed. The caption says you're his wife." Natalie froze. "What? Where did you see this?" "Business Insider, one of those business websites. Your father reads it every morning." "Natalie, is there something you haven't told us? Because I distinctly remember you complaining about being single at Christmas." "Mom, it's complicated. I can't really explain right now." "Well, I've already called your sister, and she's as confused as I am. Jackson Reed. He's quite handsome, I'll give you that, though I don't appreciate being kept in the dark about my own daughter's marriage. I have to go, Mom. I'll call you back." Natalie hung up and immediately searched for the article. There it was. A grainy photo taken through Bella Notte's window, showing her and Jackson holding hands across the table, both smiling. The caption read, "Publishing wunderkind Jackson Reed spotted with his previously undisclosed wife, identified as marketing executive Natalie Parker Reed." Her phone pinged with another text from Jackson. "I'm guessing you've seen the article. I'm so sorry. Can we meet to discuss damage control? I completely understand if you want nothing more to do with this situation." Before she could reply, her phone exploded with notifications, LinkedIn messages, Facebook friend requests, even her rarely used Twitter account was suddenly active with followers. She watched in horror as her online presence transformed in real time, people she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly interested in reconnecting. Then came the text that made her blood run cold. It was from Derek, her ex-husband, who had barely communicated except about child support, which he frequently missed. "So you married a millionaire publishing guy? Guess I should be reconsidering our custody arrangement. My lawyer will be in touch." Natalie sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. Derek had never shown much interest in shared custody before, had in fact been relieved when she didn't push for more than occasional weekend visits. But money changed everything, and the thought of a custody battle made her physically ill. She picked up her phone and called Jackson. "I'll do it," she said when he answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "But we need to add protections regarding my ex-husband and custody issues." "Absolutely," Jackson replied, relief evident in his voice. "I've already instructed our legal team to prepare for any complications on that front. Natalie, I'm so sorry about all this. I never imagined it would escalate so quickly." "Neither did I," she said quietly, "but here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, "partners in an unexpected crisis." "Just to be clear," Natalie added, "this is strictly business, a contractual arrangement for mutual benefit." There was a brief pause before Jackson responded, "Of course, strictly business." Yet as she ended the call, Natalie couldn't ignore the flutter of something decidedly unbusinesslike in her chest, a feeling she'd thought long buried after Derek's betrayal, and that, she knew, was perhaps the most dangerous complication of all. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Natalie stood before the full-length mirror in what was now their master bedroom, adjusting the emerald silk dress that had arrived that morning with a handwritten note. "For tonight's publisher gala, the color reminded me of your eyes. Jay." The dress fit perfectly, of course it did, another example of Jackson's unnerving attention to detail. She fastened the delicate silver necklace that had been her grandmother's, the only piece of fine jewelry she owned, and tried to calm her racing heart. Tonight would be their most significant public appearance yet, with over 300 industry insiders gathered at the Plaza Hotel to celebrate Parker and Reed's 75th anniversary. The event would also mark the announcement of a major restructuring that would secure the company against Apex's takeover attempts. Everything they'd worked for hinged on tonight's performance. "Mom, you look like a princess," Zoe exclaimed from the doorway, already in her pajamas. The babysitter, Rebecca's niece, thoroughly vetted and sworn to confidentiality, waited patiently behind her. "Thank you, sweetheart." Natalie bent down carefully, mindful of her dress, to hug her daughter. "You be good for Melissa, okay? I'll come kiss you goodnight when I get home, even if you're asleep." "Will Jackson come too?" Zoe asked, her expression hopeful. Natalie hesitated. Over the past weeks, Jackson had made a surprising effort with Zoe, bringing her science books she mentioned wanting, listening to her endless stories about school with genuine interest, even helping with a particularly challenging math homework assignment. Against all Natalie's cautious instincts, Zoe had become attached to him. "I'm not sure, honey, it might be very late. But he promised to tell me about the stars tonight. He said there's a constellation that looks like a dragon." "Draco," came Jackson's voice from the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his tuxedo. "And I never break a promise, Zoe Bear. I'll come say goodnight no matter what time we get back." Zoe beamed at him, and Natalie felt that now familiar twist of anxiety and something else, something warmer in her chest. This pretense was becoming dangerously comfortable. In the car on the way to the gala, Jackson noticed her unusual silence. "Nervous about tonight?" "A little," she admitted. "It's one thing to fool Victoria Blackwell across a dinner table. It's another to convince an entire ballroom of people who've known you for years." "You've been brilliant so far," he assured her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "The board is completely won over. Old man Harrington actually took me aside to tell me how pleased he was that I'd settled down with such a charming, intelligent woman." Natalie managed a smile. Charming and intelligent, but completely fabricated. Jackson's expression grew serious. "Not completely." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, sending warmth up her arm. "The Natalie Parker who's revolutionized our marketing department in just 3 weeks is very real. The woman who somehow balances single motherhood, a demanding career, and this bizarre charade with grace and humor, that's all you." The sincerity in his voice made it difficult to maintain her professional detachment. Every day, the line between performance and reality blurred further. She'd agreed to this arrangement for practical reasons: financial security, career advancement, protection from Derek's sudden custody interest, but found herself increasingly drawn to the man behind the CEO facade. "Jackson," she began, unsure what she even wanted to say, but was interrupted as the car pulled up to the red carpet entrance of the plaza. "Ready, Mrs. Reed?" he asked with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Natalie took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be, Mr. Reed." The gala was a glittering affair. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, New York's publishing elite in their finest attire. Natalie moved through it all on Jackson's arm, playing her role flawlessly. She charmed investors, bantered with authors, and diplomatically navigated questions about their whirlwind romance with practiced ease. "You never told us how you two met," prompted Eleanor Harrington, wife of the board's chairman, during dinner. Jackson smoothly interjected with their carefully rehearsed story about a chance encounter at a literary festival, but Natalie noticed Victoria Blackwell watching them intently from 2 tables away, her expression calculating. Later, as Jackson was pulled into a conversation with key investors, Victoria cornered Natalie near the ladies' room. "Impressive performance," she said, her voice silky. "You've certainly mastered the role of devoted wife." "Not a role, Victoria," Natalie replied evenly. "Just my life." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Really? Because I had the most interesting conversation with a man named Derek Parker yesterday. He seemed quite surprised to learn his ex-wife had remarried so quickly. No mention of it during their recent custody discussions." Natalie's blood ran cold, but she maintained her composure. "Derek would say anything for attention or money. I assume you provided both." "He was quite forthcoming," Victoria continued, as if Natalie hadn't spoken. "Especially about your financial struggles after the divorce. Makes one wonder what would motivate a sudden marriage to one of New York's most eligible bachelors." "Perhaps love," Natalie suggested. "Though I understand that might be a foreign concept in your world of hostile takeovers and corporate espionage." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Do you really think this charade can last? Jackson Reed has been Manhattan's most committed bachelor for years. Men like him don't change overnight." "You seem unusually interested in my husband's personal life," Natalie observed. "One might almost think your pursuit of Parker and Reed isn't entirely professional." A flash of something, anger, embarrassment, crossed Victoria's face before she regained her composure. "I pursue what I want, Mrs. Reed, whether it's a company or a man, and I rarely lose." Before Natalie could respond, Jackson appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist. "Everything all right here?" "Perfectly fine," Victoria said smoothly. "I was just telling your wife how surprised everyone was by your sudden marriage. It seems so convenient, given Heartland Publishing's traditional values and their importance to your restructuring plan." Jackson's expression remained pleasant, but Natalie felt him tense beside her. "If you're implying something, Victoria, perhaps you should speak plainly." "Oh, I think we all know what's happening here," Victoria replied. "And I've gathered quite enough evidence to make a compelling case to the board and the business press." She lifted her champagne glass in a mock toast. "Enjoy the rest of your evening. It may be the last time you attend as CEO." As Victoria glided away, Natalie turned to Jackson, panic rising. "She talked to Derek, she knows." "Let's get some air," he murmured, guiding her toward a balcony overlooking the hotel's courtyard garden. Outside, the cool night air helped clear Natalie's head. "What do we do now?" Jackson loosened his bow tie, suddenly looking tired. "I've been expecting something like this. Victoria's persistent, if nothing else. She'll expose everything." "Possibly," he acknowledged, "though her evidence is likely circumstantial. Derek can claim whatever he wants, but there's no paper trail proving our arrangement. Except the contract in my apartment safe," Natalie pointed out, "which is protected by attorney-client privilege." Jackson raked a hand through his hair. "But you're right, this could get messy for both of us." Natalie leaned against the stone balustrade. "I knew this was too good to be true. The job, the financial security, the protection from Derek's custody threats." "Natalie," Jackson said quietly, moving closer, "whatever happens with Victoria, your position at Parker and Reed is secure, and our legal team will continue handling Derek." "Why?" she asked, finally voicing the question that had plagued her for weeks. "Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know?" Jackson was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the garden below. "Because from the moment you took my hand across that restaurant table, a complete stranger helping me for no reason, I knew you were different." He turned to face her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "And every day since has only confirmed that." "Jackson, the pretense was supposed to make things simpler," he continued. "A business arrangement with clear boundaries and an expiration date, but nothing about this feels like business anymore." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "What does it feel like, then?" Instead of answering, he closed the distance between them, one hand gently cradling her face as he kissed her, not the chaste, performative kisses they'd shared for appearances, but something real and unguarded that made her heart race. When they finally parted, Natalie struggled to find her voice. "That wasn't in the contract." His laugh was soft against her cheek. "I'm prepared to renegotiate terms." The balcony door opened, and Rebecca appeared, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Mr. Reed, you're needed immediately. The board has called an emergency session in the hotel's conference room. Victoria Blackwell is making accusations." Jackson straightened, CEO mask sliding back into place. "Tell them I'll be right there." As Rebecca withdrew, he turned back to Natalie. "I have to handle this." "I know," she said. "Go. Do what you need to do." He hesitated. "When this is over, whether I'm still CEO tomorrow or not, we should talk about us, the real us, not the version we've been performing." "I'd like that," Natalie replied, surprised by how much she meant it. Hours later, after a grueling board meeting where Victoria's allegations were presented and systematically dismantled by Jackson's legal team, they returned home to find Zoe fast asleep and the babysitter dozing on the couch. After sending Melissa home with generous thanks, they stood in the quiet living room, the tension of the evening slowly dissipating. "So," Natalie said, slipping off her heels with a sigh of relief, "CEO position intact?" "More than intact," Jackson replied, loosening his tie completely. "Victoria overplayed her hand. When she couldn't prove her claims about our marriage being fraudulent, she resorted to revealing confidential Apex documents, which only exposed her own unethical business practices. And us? What happens now?" Jackson took her hands in his. "That depends entirely on you. The contract has served its purpose. You're free to move back to your apartment, continue as our marketing director, and we can announce an amicable separation as planned." "And if I don't want to?" The words surprised even her. His eyes searched hers. "What do you want, Natalie?" "Something real," she whispered. "For Zoe, for me. No more pretending." "I think," Jackson said, drawing her closer, that stopped being pretense weeks ago. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. How about we rewrite the ending to this story? No contracts, no business arrangements, just us figuring it out together. As his lips found hers again, Natalie knew that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most perfect endings.